Hi and welcome to Hospitality Huddles. I'm Scot Turner and each episode we'll be uncovering the industry's biggest challenges and serving up the solutions to help overcome them. We're bringing together some of the best thought leaders in the industry and finding some of the most creative minds shaping the future of hospitality from all around the world. They're going to share insights tackling the pain points operators just like you face every day. Hospitality Huddles is more than a podcast, it's a community of passionate individuals who appreciate the art and science of hospitality and want to help answer the difficult questions. If you like the show, one of the best ways to support us is to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It's only going to take a couple of minutes and it really does make the difference. So let's get on with today's episode, and all that's left to say is welcome to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation, one huddle at a time. Hi everyone and welcome to Hospitality Huddles, and here's another great episode lined up for you with Ollie from Pizza Pilgrims. So he's going to do a much better job of introducing himself than I will, so I'll leave it to him, but really excited to talk about employee branding today. And Ollie, we always start with the same question for everyone, which is, what does hospitality mean to you? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and welcome to the show.
Hey, well, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here. I'm Ollie. Nice to meet everyone. I'm head of people and engagement at Pizza Pilgrims. So I'm in my fifth month now. So still fairly new to the business, but settling in very, very well. Previously to that, I spent a number of years at Honest Burgers and then also Gale's Bakery as well. And then hospitality for me is it's purely about the experience and how you can go to different places, venues, whether it be restaurants, coffee shops, bars, pubs, and you can really kind of make your day really, really special. And I think it's for everyone, and it's it's a kind of a way of life, but I think hospitality is ingrained into every single person really, because it's the social aspect. It's where people go to hang out with friends, family, and just have a great time.
Yeah, I heard someone yesterday, I can't remember who it was now, talking and saying that literally whenever you have people round at home, you offer hospitality, but you tell them what they have to drink, you tell them what they have to eat, and all you do is transfer that into choice in a hospitality venue, and you're doing exactly the same thing. And I just thought it was a really nice way to put it, that you're right, hospitality is what everyone does on a day-to-day basis, isn't it? We just do it for a living.
Yeah, exactly. We do it on a living. I mean, I think like whether we're coming to work or, I guess when we're coming to work, we're on the show, probably more. But, when we're at home, your hospitality of partner, your friends coming around, as you said, whether you're offering a drink, you're making dinner, it's all a part of the hospitality. But I generally think, when you're working in it, you probably appreciate it more and more, I suppose. And you can tell when it's not going so well as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Always polish on that smile, even when it's not going right. Now, I have to say, I've been watching you on LinkedIn for since the Honest days, and then obviously you went into Bread Factory and Pizza Pilgrims now, as you talked about. And one thing that always used to smack me when I used to see your posts was how you just talked about people and branding and the employee journey a little bit differently to a lot of other people. And when I was looking at doing this podcast, it was about getting people to think differently about what they're doing in their operation, because we all know hospitality is having its troubles in most parts of the world that I visit. So I guess to those people that are listening and sitting here going, what is employee branding? Like, why is it so important? Can you give us a real kind of rundown? And we're going to go into it in more detail, but a bit of a rundown on what is employee branding? Why is it so important? And why you are so passionate about making it so prominent? Because we can all look at those businesses you've worked in and go, actually, there's really nice people messages that come out of all three of them.
Yeah, I think the everyone within a restaurant or bar, everyone in your company makes up the employer brand ultimately. And I think that's the core. I guess my core message is employer branding starts internally. It's about what we're doing internally, and we talk about it externally. I think there's the important factor of it is it's got to match up. So if you're working on external content, and you're talking about life at wherever it is you're working, it's got to come from the people. And I think that's probably where I enjoy it most, because I really join in with our teams. I really get to understand what's the good, the bad, and the ugly is. So it's got to be really authentic about what's generally happening in your organization, and then you just talk about it. And I guess where my methodology comes into is it doesn't matter if it's saying you're the best, you're the best, you're the best, because it's not about saying you're the best. It's just about saying what's your vision, what's your mission, and what you're doing to get there. So it's coming at a really, really humble way. So, and I generally think job seekers, they want to build trust with their potential employer, from the moment they start researching a company. So how do you do that? Is by just being really authentic with what you're doing and let your people speak. And it's so powerful. And I think there's nothing worse, but I think you're going to create a disjointed employer brand if you're saying one thing externally, but actually, your teams are feeling something completely different, or things are just not happening. So that's why I think it's so important that we talk about retention a lot. And I think we're an industry that's got to be really, really proud about. People might come for 4 months, people might come for 4 years, but how do we give people that great experience, however long, however many hours they're doing? So it's got to be true from the moment that they start researching a company, and that's got to then feed through all the way through the interview journey, the onboarding journey. After, as I said, 4 weeks, 4 years, they got to feel exactly the same. So that's probably how I feel about it, and that's how I'll always kind of work in the employer brand space.
Yeah, it's. I was speaking to someone the other day that'd been on an interview, and they'd been enticed by the advert and the business on the face value. They got to the interview, they'd done the normal interview questions and had the chat. And when it came around to their time to ask questions, they asked certain questions about culture and things like that. And the guy who was doing the interview just wasn't up to speed with what was going out on adverts and things like that, and everything just seemed a bit disjointed. And this was a mid-level manager who I was talking to, and he was like, I'm not even interested in the job because they're just not aligned. I can just tell there's something not right. And I guess back to your point, we know there's challenges with staffing, we know there's challenges with talent, so making sure that flows all the way through the business and the organization is so important, isn't it? Because I guess what I'm seeing from the newer workforce coming through now is they have higher expectations of operators, managers, businesses to be authentic and be genuine, like you say. So it's really important, isn't it, to make sure that the top to the bottom are aligned on what that message, vision, and culture is.
Completely. And I think it's managers play such a key part in recruitment or retention. Ultimately, the biggest challenge of recruitment is retention. Recruitment can be a lot easier, I suppose, if we really kind of focus on the inputs of retention, not talking about people leaving. So if we just put all of our energy into making people's experience working with us as good as it can be, I don't think it will never be perfect. We're all human, right?
Yeah.
But if we can make that experience as good as it can be, and that's driven by the managers, then in the interviews, we should be able to talk about what we're working on to make things better, how they can add value to that. Because I agree, like if you're in an interview and the hiring manager is saying one thing, the job advert saying another thing, the reality is something else. It's that disconnect again. And people want to know how they're going to add value to the business. Whatever generation we're talking, people want to know, after work, can they say they've had a great day or not, whether it's through sales, experience, whatever it might be. People want to know what they're playing for, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. And I get, if we want to take that first question a little bit further in terms of what is employee branding, how does employee branding differ to company branding or company messaging? And should they differ? Should they be the same? Is there somewhere in the middle? Because there's lots of arguments on both sides of the fence, isn't there, about where it should be? What would you say is the thing there?
Yeah, I think that's the big question. It's going to be the same, but slightly different. The fact is, I think if we're going consumer marketing, they are trying to get people. They're trying to get customers. They're getting customers. But employer branding, we're aiming for new teammates. So I think the brand's guidelines and the guidelines are going to be the same. The tone might be slightly different, so the language might be slightly different, but it's got to be on brand, certainly. And I think this is where it's so important for talent attraction, recruitment, that space. So the people space and the marketing teams are working together at this, because ultimately, we want to fill our restaurants, hotels, bars, whatever it might be, with customers. But to do that, we've got to have the fully staffed teams as well. So it's really, in both of our worlds that we work together. But I'd say, as a rule of thumb, consumer marketing is going for customers. Employer branding, we're going for new teammates. So the angle will be slightly different, but the guidelines have got to be the same.
Yeah, it's a really good point to flag up. We talk about experience a lot in hospitality. That everything we do is crafting experiences for people, and I think sometimes people just see that as a service thing, but the employee piece, I think, from an experience opportunity, is becoming much more important now. Back to your point about retention and trying to retain people, where it might take you longer to find new people that don't have the same skill sets, or training takes longer. How do you use employee branding to kind of get that experience over to, whether it's the team that are in the organization, whether it's people who might be attracted to work for the organization? What are the things that you do from an employee branding standpoint to help with that experience piece?
So I think this is where actually I think the employer brands goes in to out. So whatever's happening internally, we talk about it externally. It's nice, employees find, the team quite like the fact that, their face might be somewhere or their story might be somewhere. And I generally think, for people outside the organization looking in, we, Phil from Honest Burgers, he drilled this into me, that we should be, creating a glass window effect. So if someone outside our organization is just looking in, they should be able to see exactly what's happening. And that's always stuck with me. But I guess from a engagement point there's got to be, we've got to be looking at celebrations, so celebrating promotions and talking about it consistently. We've got to be talking about what's happening in the food team, what's happening in the marketing team, allowing, so we have our 5-year club. So anyone that's been here for over 5 years, we get them to talk, and we're just kind of creating a bit of an internal thing for them as well. So it's kind of crafting a whole experience to let people have a voice, let people talk about what's happening in their worlds, what's happening, in their cultures, whether it be, what food do they like, and let them put some menu dishes on our internal comms platform. So it's all a part of the whole, I guess, employer experience, because people outside will want to watch it. And I think what that does is create so many different opportunities to attract new people into the business. So if we, as an example, company A are just posting on job boards, and it's just adverts, and that adverts potentially are saying the same thing, maybe a couple of Instagram or social campaigns along the way. But then you have company B who are exploring opportunities on all social media, where there might be Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, TikTok, and then job adverts. There you've got a refer a friend scheme that's really honed in, and we're showcasing things consistently, whether it be on a weekly basis. You're much more likely to get more people watching, and it might not be there and then, but it might be in 6 months' time, because you're building this brand reputation, which ultimately, what employer branding is. It's the brand reputation, and over time, this will build up, and more people will start applying. But it's got to be relevant, up to date, fresh, and that's so key. So if it's pictures from ex-employees who've worked here 2 years ago, it's really important to get some fresh photos up, right? If it's stories, share stories that are happening now, and might be, kind of the latest trends, whether it be sustainability and what we're doing around sustainability, what we're doing with diversity, and keep on talking about it, because more people will. I can't actually remember what the figure was that Glassdoor shared, but I think it was 75% of people, of job seekers, will research a company before applying. So it's really important that we're actually doing that.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. And I guess you mentioned a few things there which were really interesting. And the first one for me is back to the Honest Burger and Philip saying, let's be transparent. Is so many times you see it's kind of hidden behind the back door what they do, what people are doing with the teams and employees and people, and what the initiatives are, how involved they are. And what always stuck out to me, particularly when you were in the role in Honest Burger, is how you would share on LinkedIn about what retention rates were, how many people had been there for a period of time, what the training was, and etc. etc. And I think that's what always made it stand out for me, was that whole transparency piece. And I think, I guess my message to this, and I'd love to get your input, is if you're a HR person there right now going, should we be showing all of our, should we be laying it out? Should we be showing our competition what we're doing and how we're doing it? Like, what would you say to that? Because there's definitely people I know in the industry who'd be like, no, we'd never show some of that information.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because the transparency piece is so key. And truth be told, if people really wanted to know the data, they can go and find it somehow. But I think it says a lot about your organisation, if you can be transparent, and there'll be things that you're working towards. So Honest, and we've done it at Pizza Pilgrims. Actually, we're just showcasing, for example, our Glassdoor. So we'll have a Glassdoor badge on our website. We will showcase how many people are joining us. So there's quite a few metrics we've put on our last happiness score. So we have a staff survey, essentially, which is called a happiness survey here, and we've just put those results on our careers page, because things might not be perfect, but if we can say, hey, this is our current score, this is what we're working on at the moment, people will want to join that. And if they don't, then that's absolutely fine. They're pretty much not the right people for us either. But yeah, it's a bold move. But I generally think, if I was speaking to anyone, is if you're not proud about the figures, or not proud about what you're doing to get where you want, then it might be time to change some tactics.
Mm.
And look at things slightly differently. But because there will be things that just aren't perfect. But if you can say, well, actually, I know there's these two things that we're working towards, then that should be absolutely fine as well. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd say.
It's back to that authenticity and transparency and being genuine again, isn't it? Is saying, we're not perfect, but this is where, and take it or leave it. And I guess it's back to that thing of finding new people, bringing them on board, onboarding them, bringing them into
Mm,
your organization costs that much money that sometimes it's almost better to not hire those people because they're not the right fit or they're not the right fit for the organization than bring them in, try and have the issues with people coming and going, and it just makes
yeah,
it a bit, it then affects team morale and stuff like that. Sometimes it's almost better to be
yeah.
open and find the right people, isn't it?
I completely agree, and don't get me wrong. I think there's companies are different, company brands are slightly different, so guidelines can be different. So I completely appreciate that there might be some things that you just don't want to share, and some companies might be able to share a little bit more. Um, and when we were honest and some of the stuff we shared, like, don't get me wrong, like we had some haters there as well, like on quite a few occasions where you get some hate mail, but that's fine. I think if you are putting out this kind of stuff, it's okay to get some hate mail because you probably know that
Mm.
you're doing the right thing. I think if you're trying to
Yep.
please 100% of the people, it's probably just not going to be a good enough job. So the fact that we did get a little bit of hate, but 2% hate and 98% of people really liked it. We attracted some really, really great people. So we'll keep those methods at where we are now, because it's about attracting the right people for the brands who
Yeah.
want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And it's really hard to recruit. So you're going to get things wrong. And so let's face it, how many restaurants that have been around for 2 years have 5-star on Google reviews? Like things go wrong, things don't work out for whatever reason. It's just you've got to accept that and find the right benchmark and work towards it as well, isn't it? And I guess the other thing that you mentioned when we were talking then was about social. And it was funny how you plan company A was on the adverts and only did the adverts. And then when you went on to B, you were talking about using socials and using some of that bits. And then the way you were speaking, it was almost like the advert was the call to action that was the end result of other work going in. How important um, is your image on social media? How important is the frequency of talking about what you're doing well on social media? And how, I guess, for people sitting here going, my marketing team never let me talk about jobs I need to do, or for whatever reasons it doesn't fit in with the plan. How can you bring some of that into the social strategy that your marketing teams might be doing so that you're constantly in people's minds for that right time when they're looking for the right job because it's been the wrong day where they are now, or they're just looking for a change? Because the social bit's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of that whole marketing guidelines and strategy piece?
Yeah, and it is, and this is, I guess, again, why it's so important to have a great relationship with your marketing team, so you can work on the strategy together. Um, the marketing teams ultimately, they're the professionals around marketing, but we know from a people team, it's really, we need people as well. So I think it's, as a phase one, it's really important to build that strategy together. Phase two would be, it's what can we do around social campaigns, social awareness campaigns, because if your social, and I suppose it depends on how your socials are performing. If your socials are performing and potentially not representing who you're trying to target, then it might need a bit more work. But I mean, if you look at the Pizza Pilgrims Instagram, James runs the Instagram account, and it says so much about who we are as a brand, and the type of people that we recruit, our values, our culture. It says so much, and I think the fact that we've got one of our founders managing our Instagram says a lot in the first place. And I love that, piece. So we use that to our advantage. So it might be, some call to action might be just using some of the social content, or directing people to our social content, and then if they're the right people, then they'll probably come and apply to us. But I think there's other opportunities that really, I think what you're trying to do is drive as many people directly as possible, but careers page, your socials. So really just put that as your focus, and then the job adverts should kind of follow. And working really closely with your job boards to make sure your SEO search is where it needs to be as well. So I guess there's lots that you can do, but certainly working with the marketing team is so important for your performance of where your job adverts are sitting and your presence socially, because a lot of people, most people will research on social media before they apply for a job.
Yeah, for sure. And I just held you accountable. I was looking on Pizza Pilgrims there. I followed them anyway. But I think you're right. Like, that people piece always comes out quite a bit, doesn't it? And especially back to that authenticity, transparency. This is probably going to come up quite a bit. But, whenever I think of Pizza Pilgrims, I always think of the people. But I always think of when COVID hit, and there was the pizza in the post, and you got it for the first time, and you did the QR code, and it was the chef in his house, like really raw, because it was in the middle of COVID. And it was like, I was working in central London at the time in restaurants and things, but it was just that piece about how it was like an engagement and a connection with a human. And I just loved how Pizza Pilgrims put someone front and center of that in terms of how the whole thing was delivered. And it's always stuck with me ever since, because I think it was just, it's just a really good show of how you can use that people aspect to build engagement with guests and with employees.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I experienced it myself. Before joining Pilgrims, I was watching the Pilgrimage 2 unfold on socials. So all the videos that they were sharing, and it seriously just got me so excited. But and when I was in interviews, it was their Instagram. Like, I was so bought into some of their content, but then all their latest content around the Pilgrimage 2 was getting me so excited and kind of geared up for that first day. So I've generally been on it myself. But going back to COVID, I was at Honest Burgers at the time there, and we were doing something very similar. Tom, co-founder of Honest, was doing the virtual burger cook-alongs, and it was great because just that face-to-face interaction, whether it was in a restaurant or not, it wasn't, you still got that kind of level of experience. And we did exactly the same with all our employees, but getting in some DIY burger kits, and we would do it all virtually as well. People loved it. So it's those golden nuggets that build on people's experiences that we can talk about externally, and anyone should talk about externally. And I generally think, like, there must be so many opportunities, and I speak to quite a few people about around about employer branding and storytelling opportunities, just to get people thinking about, okay, so how can you look for content that you can talk about? And there is, like, we're hospitality, we do so much for our people, really. So it's just finding the opportunities to be able to write about, talk about, make some videos about, and sharing it.
Yeah. But how you truly deliver that is then how kind of you and your team sitting centrally, as you said, can go into the locations, into the restaurants, and there's people getting that for you, and you're available so that that content gets through to you, and then it can get through to the end viewer, user, whatever that might be. And I think that's, one thing that really stands out is how that content, how you can then extract that content, isn't it? And it makes a huge difference when you're there with the teams. You know the names, you get them bought into it, and that's when GMs start really proving the salt more than just bringing in revenue through the tills as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably a key message on here is to say that um, use your unique selling point. So use your kind of EVP to talk about what you're doing. If you look at other people too much and other companies too much, you're probably going to be blending in. But actually, really understand what makes you unique as an employer and what makes you special as an employer, and just focus on those, 1, 2, 3 areas, and then that's where the consistency around your messaging should form. Um, and and by consistency, I mean once a week, once every 2 weeks, write some stories, and that might just be something, the inputs that are adding value to the company vision or mission. So that's what will make you probably stand out more so than just talking about pay scales, just talking about working hours, just talking about um, career opportunities. Because whilst that might be great, it's also great in other companies as well. So don't get me wrong, those things are great, but do they make you stand out? I don't know. But if there's other things around some of your suppliers, or your sustainability, or maybe some internal groups that you're doing, feedback groups as an example, they're the type of things that will make you stand out over some of your competitors. I probably just listed some really bad examples there, but I'm sure there's other examples better than that.
No, for sure. I have a good friend, Sean Walchef, who advocates for digital storytelling, and he has a formula that he always says to, and he holds me accountable on some of the content I do. And his formula on it is consistency plus quantity equals quality. And I think it's back to what you were saying there: is don't ignore the storytelling piece, because that's the bit that gets people engaged. So, get stuff. It can be raw, it can be authentic, it doesn't need to be polished, it doesn't need to be done by a video editor or shiny. Just get the content, get the consistency in terms of talking to people and messaging, and the quality will come from it down the line through engagement and people wanting to be part of the journey. Want it. It's it
Yeah.
always rings true to me, that when I'm looking at it as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice way to put it. Completely. And it's and it's still going to be relevant. Like we were talking about the that kind of formula that I shared, which is kind of just my kind of thinking on that triangle. And it's how do you match your kind of EVP? So what makes you unique as an employer? The actual experience, and then your employer brand. So the EVP is what's actually happening. What can what do you
Yeah.
offer as an employer? The actual experience. So that's gotta match. And then on the other side of the triangle, you've got your employer brand. So what are you doing with those two things to talk about it? Now, if you only have two of those things, it's not going to work, because if your employer value proposition is saying one thing, but your actual experience is saying something completely different, a team is saying something different, then your employer brand is just going to be so disjointed. And it's the same, like if you take the employer brand side away of it, and you've got a really strong employer value proposition, your teams are saying exactly that and feeling everything that's happening, but your employer brand isn't activated, then you're not going to attract the right people. So it's so important you get those three key areas aligned for the best outcome.
Yep. Yeah, I'm going to put that in the show notes as well, because that was the thing that finally got me to kind of reach out and go, "Ollie, we've got to talk about this employee branding." When I saw that, because it's such an easy way to put it and digest it through.
Yeah.
It's really simple. I guess continuing on the social theme, one of the campaigns that really stands out of kind of employee branding to me in the last couple of years is the early bird campaign at Gales, because when I opened bakeries, so I studied Gales for a bit. I'm a Gales customer, and when I saw that, it just looked so unified in terms of it was just a great one to appeal to hospitality, especially considering coming out of COVID. And I'll let you explain it more than me, but it was centered around people who didn't necessarily want to work nights, and the bakery work is earlier in the day, so it makes it much better. But I also thought, as a guest, it just really reaffirmed to me as a customer of Gales, it's baked fresh, it's done in the morning, and it like almost reaffirmed what Gales was as a brand. And I'd love to just talk a bit about it, because it was, for me, it was just the most brilliant campaign in terms of, one, a customer brand profile, and two, an employee brand profile. So yeah, maybe explain better than me a bit more about it, and then just talk me through kind of where the logic was and how it all came about, because I think this is a really good example to people of how to nail employee branding.
Yeah. So I mean, I hadn't really started. It wasn't long after I started at Gales, and the consumer brand is really, really strong at Gales, and it's such a fantastic business. But the people offer, in terms of what we were talking about and how we would talk, hadn't really been activated. Truth be told, we were doing some great stuff, but we just weren't putting it out there enough. So, and really, hadn't really had a defined employer value proposition, and why people should be joining us. So, what I noticed was that a lot of people were joining from late night operations. And as I was going around the bakeries, I was talking about, I was talking to these new people about why they were joining us. And they were like, I've got a family, I can't finish work at 1 a.m. anymore. And it was mostly actually from bars. So we had a lot of people from bars. So, and it just kind of came, and I was like, we just need to be attracting or targeting people from late night operations who want a bit more of a work-life balance. And I remember seeing this, well, two posts, but initially it was this first post. I can't remember what the name of the person is, but they had basically said that they were leaving the industry because of the late nights and the hours, and they couldn't get their work-life balance. I remember just thinking, right, we've got to do something about this. There's so many people. And there was an industry report. I think Harry had just shared this industry report that X amount of people were leaving, would consider leaving the industry for better work-life balance. So it was the combination of that report. I saw this LinkedIn post. I was speaking with quite a few members of the team about where they come from, why did they join us, and I was like, we've got to put a campaign together for this. We've got to be talking about quite a few of these different stories, and it's such a hot topic, right? Talking about work-life balance, talking about environment, whether people just didn't want to be around alcohol anymore, people just wanting their evenings back, and working in a bakery, it's a really, really nice environment. So we just kind of collated some of this together, and we did some research analysis of our most recent management hires, and there was like 37, I think, 37% of our latest manager hires from the last 6 months have been from people from late night operations, and I mean late night like bars. So we went with that, and it, there was a proposal to the marketing director around, look, we need to do something around our people branding. We need to put something together. And everyone was like on it. Like everyone like just absolutely loved it. So we called it the early bird campaign. So the early bird never works late. It was, I'm really glad that you said that it looked pretty well put together, because it was very much an internal job that Dylan, who does videos for Gales. So we spent a few days with Dylan, and we got a bunch of our managers and our team to talk about the reason that they came and joined Gales. And it was like, I think we had one person talking about they were just missing too many bedtimes around putting their kids to sleep. One person said, just that way of life around healthy eating, getting home in the evenings now, so then they could have dinner with their family or dinner at home on their own, and they can cook for themselves rather than having to eat in the restaurant they'd worked in. I think we had one person who just didn't really want to be around alcohol anymore. So we had a handful of these great stories, and we just put a camera in their face and we're like, just tell us about why did you join us. So we put together this one main video, and then there was lots of small snippets. We teamed up with our digital agency who helped put it on our socials. But I mean, when I mean that, we literally spent hardly anything, like not much at all on our socials for our sponsor socials. And we went live in October. We had, between October and December, we were opening like another 8 bakeries. So we had like, I can't remember how many people we needed to hire, but we're filling 8 new bakery teams, as well as the other 100 odd bakeries that we were operating at the same time. And we ran the campaign for 3 months, so October to December. And off the back of that, we hired over 200 people. So it was great. Like we we were nominated for a few awards for it, but I guess the beauty of that is it really kind of activated and really kind of affirmed the people that we're attracting and what it meant to work at Gales. You've got to be, you've got to love getting up early in the morning. And some of the content, it was around, early birds, obviously. It's really represented the consumer brand around fresh baked goods early in the morning. It was about our bakers getting to work with the sunrise, which meant early mornings. But then we really just played on the fact that you're going to get your evenings back, which is unheard of in hospitality. And it's not, unheard of, but we're just not shouting about enough that most people are finishing latest like 6 p.m. So then you've got your whole evening to spend with your friends, your family, playing sport, reading books, whatever it be that you're missing out on. Come and join us, because you will get it all back. So that was, I guess, the narrative that we just wanted to play on, and it worked. It worked really, really well. And I really hope that I'm pretty sure they're still using some of the content still now, because it really defines the value proposition, essentially.
Yeah. And I think it's a brilliant way to affirm everything that we've just said on the last kind of 40 minutes, because it was just, it just summed everything up. And I think, when I looked at it, and it's why I wanted to kind of bring it up, everything that you were saying there about kind of dinner with the kids and getting home to have tea, being a bit more healthy, is all stuff I could relate to from my career. So, and it just touches, doesn't it? I mean, it shows the same for you and anyone else who's worked in the industry. Like all the things you just said then about the reasons why, we can all probably go, yeah, we've sacrificed. So it's just a really nice way to kind of go, if that's something that's really important and you really need to make a change, but you don't know how, it's the perfect way to do it. And I think it's back to that storytelling, the bit about being genuine and authentic, and then how you can really get that to kind of be the ethos of the total brand was a really good example. So thanks for sharing that. I guess the other bit that I really enjoy as well is the bit about how you can make process and the legal stuff and the boring bits kind of sound a bit less boring, kind of overwhelming as well. Like, how important is it now, or maybe it's not even now, maybe it's always been, but how important is it to kind of soften some of that kind of legal onboarding process, contracts being, 8 pages to be, I think it was 1 page where you were honest before. How important is that in terms of, I don't know, onboarding people or making paperwork easier for managers, or the whole thing? Because I guess some people are probably like, well, it's something we have to do. It's a tick box exercise, and on we go. It's a really interesting one, this one.
So I think the faster you get a sense of belonging, or the quicker you get a sense of belonging, the more value you'll have in the organization, and the more someone will want to learn and want to be there. So I think a lot of the scary jargon we just need to take out. So there is some terminology which I just see there's opportunities to change that terminology. So like when we are honest, and a fine example was the contract, actually, that that got a lot of exposure online, and I remember sharing that online and just saying, hey, we just changed some of our terminology and the design of our contract to make it feel a bit more like us, like we're speaking, and 98% of people loved it. We got so many people wanting to join us purely because we changed that, and they loved the fact that we were kind of changing a scary document into something that was fun, loud, represented the brand. But then there was another 2% of people who went in on it, and it was great. So I think that's a fine example, because it meant we weren't trying to please everyone, but we were trying to please the right people. So I mean, recently at Pizza Pilgrims, we've been changing the terminology of the probation period, because I think the probation period, and I actually did this at Honest as well, but the probation period, it's a scary, it's not a nice thing to be talking about, and I think people talk about it less because of the word probation. I generally think so. I think we talk about probation, whether it would be heads of departments or whether you're in one of the restaurants, and we're talking when's your probation finishing, or can you do that in your probation period? It's so scary, and it's just not needed. So we've changed it to the honeymoon period, because when you're coming into the business, it should be a place where you can learn, you can make mistakes, share feedback. It should, ultimately, you're going to get this kind of sense of excitement, and that's what we want to try and create. But it's easier to talk about, how do we make the honeymoon successful, and that's our kind of way of thinking, rather than how do we get you to pass your probation period. I feel like that moves it from a two-way street. From a one-way street, which is very much employer-led. Can you get past the probation period? But if we talk about the honeymoon success, then it's both employer and employee. How can we make it work together? By making mistakes, by giving feedback, by making it a really, really great experience ultimately. So I guess long story short is I just see the opportunity in just taking a lot of the scary words out and changing it to something what people like talking about, and to make it a bit more fun, basically.
Yeah, make it positive. People will be positive. What I guess is the way to look at it. But I got a couple more questions just before we go. And when I was preparing for this and sent some subjects to you to talk about before, I worked in hotels for 15 years, and the back of house was always used as a place to put the brand brainwash and like how great we are, and this is the history of the company, and this is how many locations we have. And it was more used it was almost like a token gesture back of house than anything with real purpose. And it's funny, you don't see as much of it in restaurants as maybe you do in hotels, but how do you feel about kind of back of house, heart of house branding, and how you can use it effectively and share the brand experience and kind of take it away from this brand brainwash kind of ramming stuff down people's throats to being a real kind of genuine thing that people can engage with. What's your feelings on that? Because there's probably a lot of people listening to this who are in hotels going, yeah, that's our hotel right now.
How do I feel about that? Businesses will have their own identity, I guess. So I think it's obviously what works for the business. And I think it's just like what we were just talking about previously is, some of the scary words, we can change them to make it feel a bit more like Pilgrims. Using that, I guess I'm very lucky that we have two founders who are so ingrained into everything we do, and like seriously lucky because Tom and James just live and breathe our values. So because they live and breathe our values, it really shows what it means to work here. And again, I'm still quite new to the business, but I see it every day. Like, there's such a humble approach to whatever level you are. We're just going to muck in and we're just going to enjoy it and we're going to work together. So I don't think you're ever going to make your values stick by putting it on a wall behind you and hope it just sticks. You have to believe it, and when you're coming to work you have to showcase it. But and I think that's how culture is about a feeling, right? So it's how you feel about coming to work on a Monday morning or a Saturday morning, and by doing that, it's how people behave with the values. So yes, you can put your values in a handbook, for example, but you still got to represent them, and everyone's got to represent them, and you got to talk about them. If there's a new project coming up, it's how does this project fit in with our values. So as long as everyone's representing the values, that will generate the culture that you're trying to aim for. If you have it on the wall, great, like have it on the wall, but don't have it on the wall if actually you're acting different, and it's not believed and it's not being thread through the whole organization. Because I think values have got to come from the top downwards, right? So everyone's got to live by them, but it's got to be generated from the top downwards.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And then the last question, and you touched on it earlier about kind of putting Glassdoor on the website and doing that. And I guess when I was thinking about it again, we probably don't put enough as an industry into kind of our social reputation online from an employee perspective either. I know we've got Glassdoor, but how many businesses do you walk in that don't even know what their score is and things like that? So like, how do you, I guess last question to kind of end all of this. When you've done all of those principles, you've got the employee branding right, you've got the values there, you set the culture, it's going well. How do you measure that employee sentiment, whether it's online in the business and how it might be? And then how do you celebrate it, or how do you talk about things where you might need to work on? And, back to your point, like being really open about it. Putting the score online is a really good way, but it'd be just interesting to hear what your thoughts are on this one.
So I think there's probably one measure that I really like, and we use. The other measure, I don't know how to get it, but I'm still figuring that out. Maybe you can help. But there's the internal stuff. So we have our happiness survey, which is the staff survey. So, and one of the questions would be, how happy are you at work? And that's great to understand how many people and what percentages of people are happy at work. But I actually think the real data point that we should be looking at is how many people took part in the engagement survey. So if you have a workforce and 20% of the workforce actually take part in the engagement survey, you really need to be understanding why the 80% people didn't take part. Whilst that feedback is great that you've got, but the real measure there is only 20% of people took part. So if you have 60% of people taking part in your engagement survey, I think you're doing something well. People want to have a voice, people want to give feedback, people want to support you as an employer to get better. So I think that's a really, really strong metric to look at, is how many people take part in your surveys, whether that's a half yearly survey or a pulse survey that goes out every month, whatever that might be, whatever the feedback forum is. It's a good metric to look at. The other one would be, past employees. I would love to know how many past employees return as a customer. And that would be a really interesting metric to understand. So you would have thought, people leaving, if they come back as a customer, they probably have had a good experience. You just want to know how many people have left happy. And people who leave happy will probably return as a customer. If you can get that metric and then showcase that, I think, again, that says so much about the experience that you offer as an employer for your team. So, I mean, I don't have that metric at the moment, but I would love to get it. Like, we can ask everyone, but how do you really authentically, how do you get it from and capture it from every single person?
Yeah, that's that's the pizza coming for lunch. It's a really good one though, because you're absolutely right, and it's I guess one of my biggest beefs with final work interviews or leavers interviews is that by the time you get to them on the last day, they've already emotionally switched off, mentally switched off. Things that caused them to leave now don't seem like such a big thing because they've already kind of gone. And I guess that's a great way to go, actually truly how many people are there. And like that final work interview, I don't know, it all just seems a bit too late for me. And that's a brilliant, I've never thought that metric before, but it really is a good one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just not a fan of exit interviews, or leaver interviews. Because you can only really get so many of them, truth be told. There's usually two sides. I'm just not a fan. I'd much prefer to focus on stay interviews and understand why people are staying, rather than why people are leaving. Don't get me wrong, there's occasions where you might want to contact that person, really kind of understand. I get it, 100%, still do that, and I believe in that. But ultimately, I'd love to put all our focus on understanding as how many people will return as a customer.
Yeah, it's a really good metric, and it's probably 100%, and it's and that's probably a really good place to end, because I don't have the answer to help with that one. So, listen,
I was hoping you would.
Sorry. Yeah. That was going to be the value of coming on the show, right? But But listen, Ollie, I could stay here for another hour talking about this, because it's such a interesting subject, and I think the way you deliver it, and obviously with the companies that you work for, can portray it out to the market is amazing, and I love watching what you do on LinkedIn as well. So without getting too fanboy, it's been a really great chat. So thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I've been following you a lot as well. Post a day for the last year. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's not always easy, is it? But it just goes back to show that thing about consistency and quantity gets you there in the end, doesn't it? So it's a great message on that.
That's great. No, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ollie. You've been listening to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation one huddle at a time. Hospitality Huddles is brought to you in partnership with Auden Hospitality. Visit the website at www.audenhospitality.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.